Mara found the listing on a Thursday evening between 2 glasses of wine and a headache that had been building since noon. The price was wrong. Too low for the neighborhood, too low for the size, too low for the photographs, which showed high ceilings, original wood floors, and a clawfoot tub she immediately decided she loved. The ad had no reviews. The landlord's name was simply listed as Mr. V, with a local phone number beneath it. She called on Friday morning. The phone rang 11 times. She was about to hang up when a man answered, not with a hello, but with a long, deliberate silence followed by, "You'll want the apartment." It wasn't a question. Yes, Mara said. Yes, Mara said. "I saw the listing online. Is it still available?" "It is always available," the man said. She told herself it was just an odd turn of phrase. Her French wasn't perfect, and maybe something had been lost in the translation of his accent. Thick and Eastern European, she thought, or perhaps further east than that. She couldn't place it. She arranged to view the apartment that afternoon. The building was on a narrow street in the 11th arrondissement, sandwiched between a halal butcher and a laundromat with foggy windows. The facade was older than anything around it, its stone face a shade too dark, as if it had absorbed decades of exhaust and rain and something else that hadn't quite washed away. Mr. V was waiting at the door when she arrived. He was a small man, smaller than she'd imagined from the voice, with thin white hair combed flat against his skull and eyes that were a very pale gray, like winter ice over a shallow pond. He wore a dark waistcoat over a white shirt, a silver watch chain looped across his middle, and he held the door open with one hand while the other remained tucked behind his back. "Miss Mara," he said. "Come in." She had not told him her name. She would later tell herself she must have, on the phone or in an email she'd forgotten sending. But standing in the doorway that afternoon, she felt the cold current move through her chest, quick and sourceless, like a draft from a room that had no window. She stepped inside anyway. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a long corridor that smelled of cedar and something underneath. Not rot exactly, but age. Deep, compressed age, the kind that collects in walls. The apartment itself was beautiful. The ceilings were high and ribbed with plaster molding. The floors were exactly as photographed, warm honey oak, still lustrous, with a faint creak near the kitchen that Mara found charming. The clawfoot tub was real and white and large. The windows in the main room looked out onto a small courtyard where a single tree grew, leafless despite it being June. "Why is the tree bare?" Mara asked. Mr. V looked at the tree for a moment before answering. "It has always been bare," he said. Then he told her the rent, which was even lower than the listing. She signed the lease that evening. The first night, Mara slept badly. This she attributed to the unfamiliar sounds of the building, the pipes, the settling joints, the distant clatter of the street outside. New apartments always took a week or two to learn. She'd moved 4 times in 6 years. She knew the process. But the sounds in this building were different from other buildings. In other buildings, the sounds were irregular, unpredictable. A bang at 2 a.m., followed by nothing for hours. A creak at 4 a.m. that resolved into quiet. Random, human noise. The texture of a structure inhabited by strangers. The sounds in this building were patient. A slow creak from the hallway, not sudden, but gradual, as if weight were being applied to a floorboard incrementally, testing it. Then a pause. Then another creak, slightly closer. Then nothing for exactly as long as the last silence before it began again. On the 3rd night, Mara got out of bed and opened the apartment door. The hallway was empty. The bare bulb that hung from the ceiling cast its light in the same tired arc it always did. The carpet runner down the center of the floor lay undisturbed. There was nothing there, and yet she stood in the doorway for a long time, certain, in that involuntary animal way that bypasses all reasoning, that the hallway had been occupied only a moment before. She told herself it was the building. Old buildings sounded like this. She'd read something once about thermal expansion, about how structures spoke their own language at night as they cooled. By the end of the first week, she had almost convinced herself. Then, she found the photographs. She'd been painting the 2nd bedroom, more of a study really, barely large enough for a desk, when the shelf bracket pulled away from the wall and sent 3 books tumbling to the floor. Behind where they'd stood, someone had taped an envelope to the plaster. Inside the envelope were 6 photographs, all black and white, all taken in the apartment. She recognized the window in the main room, the kitchen tiles, the doorway to the bathroom. The photographs were old. The quality was thick and silver, the edges browning, but the apartment was identifiable. In 5 of the photographs, the apartment was empty. In the 6th, someone was standing in the corner of the main room facing away from the camera. A woman, Mara thought, from the shape of the shoulders. Though the figure was tall, taller than seemed natural for the low angle of the shot, and the proportions were slightly wrong in a way she couldn't articulate beyond wrong. The figure was looking at the wall. Mara placed the photographs back in the envelope and put the envelope in the kitchen drawer, under the takeaway menus. She did not throw them away. She was not entirely sure why. That night, the sounds in the hallway were closer than before. Mara had noticed the woman on the 2nd floor on her first day. Early 60s, silver hair cut close, always wearing the same dove gray cardigan regardless of the weather, always emerging from apartment 2B at exactly the moment Mara passed the landing, as if she had been waiting. Her name was Madame Ferro. She brought Mara a small tart on the 4th day as a welcome gift, and Mara, grateful for any human contact after a week of unsettling nights, invited her in for coffee. Madame Ferro did not come past the doorway. She stood at the threshold, holding her coffee cup with both hands, and looked at the apartment with the practiced stillness of someone who has decided in advance not to react to something. "You've settled in quickly," she said. "It's a beautiful apartment," Mara replied, "though I've been sleeping poorly. Old buildings, I suppose." Madame Ferro was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How many of you are there?" Mara blinked. "Sorry, in the apartment. How many of you are living here?" "Just me." The older woman looked at the main room again, at the corner near the window, and then back at Mara. "That is what the others said as well," she said, and handed Mara the empty coffee cup and left. Mara thought about this for 2 days before she knocked on 2B again. Madame Ferro answered immediately, which confirmed Mara's suspicion that she was usually standing near the door. "The others," Mara said. "The previous tenants. How many were there?" Madame Ferro opened the door wider and let her in. The apartment was the mirror image of Mara's own. Same layout, same molding, same floor plan. But where Mara's was spare and freshly painted, Madame Ferro's was dense with objects, books, framed photographs, potted plants on every windowsill. The accumulation, Mara thought, of someone who had decided long ago never to leave. "I have lived in this building for 31 years, Madame Ferro said, pouring coffee without asking whether Mara wanted any. "In that time, 11 tenants have rented the apartment on the 3rd floor. 11 is not so many, Mara said. Over 30 years. None of them stayed longer than 4 months. A silence. Why? Madame Ferro sat down and folded her hands. "The first, I did not know well. He was a painter. He left in winter in the middle of the night without his belongings. The second stayed 3 weeks. A young woman. She told me on the day she left that she had not slept since moving in." She paused. She looked it. "And after?" "Some left quietly, some less so. One man, the 7th or 8th, I have lost count. I heard screaming from his apartment at 4 in the morning. When I called through the door, he told me he had seen a woman standing at the foot of his bed, looking at him." Madame Ferro picked up her coffee. He was gone by morning. Mara thought of the photograph, the figure in the corner facing the wall. "You've never seen anything yourself?" she asked. "I am very careful," Madame Ferro said, "about where I look." Walking back upstairs, Mara made a decision. She would look through the apartment thoroughly. Every corner, every cupboard, every space she had not yet opened. She would find a rational explanation, and she would stay. She had signed a lease. She was not the sort of person who fled. She was still telling herself this when she opened the wardrobe in the 2nd bedroom and found, scratched into the wood on the inside of the door, a long list of names. 12 names in total. The last one was hers. Mr. V returns. She called him that evening. The phone rang 11 times again. Exactly 11, she counted, and then his voice. "Miss Mara." "There are names in the wardrobe," she said. "No preamble. 12 of them. My name is the last one." A pause. "Yes," said Mr. V. How is my name in a wardrobe that's been there for decades? Time, he said carefully, is not always sequential in that apartment. Mara gripped the phone. What does that mean? It means the apartment is very old, he said, and the things inside it are older still. I apologize. I should have mentioned this when you signed. I think you should. I think you should. I think you should come here and explain. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Mr. V was quiet for a long moment. I do not go into that apartment, he said. You are the landlord. Yes. Then come explain what is in your apartment. Another silence. Longer this time. She could hear something in the background. A low sound she couldn't identify, rhythmic and slow. She thought at first it was a clock, then that it wasn't. What I can tell you, he said finally, is this: the apartment was owned before me by a woman named Voss. Before her, by a man whose name I do not know. Before him, it was not an apartment. It was part of a much larger structure that no longer exists. Something happened in that structure, in that room. I do not know what. I have tried to find out. I have not succeeded. What happened to the previous tenants? They left. All of them. All of the ones I knew of. A beat. The names in the wardrobe go further back than my records. Mara looked at the wardrobe from across the room. The door was still open. She could see the inside panel from here. The scratched names, pale against the old dark wood. Is it dangerous? She asked. Mr. V took a very long time to answer. The ones who left, he said, left because they were frightened. I cannot tell you that what frightened them was actually dangerous. I cannot tell you that it was not. He paused again. I would tell you to leave, but the others I told that to left, and I do not think it helped them. I think the apartment follows, a little. Not far, but a little. The rhythm in the background of the call grew slower, or she imagined it did. What do you mean it follows? I mean, he said, that some of them called me from other cities. She stood very still in the center of her main room. The bare tree in the courtyard was visible through the window. In the darkness, without its leaves, it looked less like a tree and more like a diagram of one. The abstract idea of a tree rendered in something that had never quite been alive. Good night, Miss Mara, said Mr. V, and the line went dead. She did not sleep that night. She sat in the kitchen with all the lights on and the television playing at low volume, and she waited for morning. Nothing happened. No sounds in the hallway, no creaks. Just the television's murmur and the occasional distant siren from the street. The absence felt worse than the sounds. It felt like patience. The corner of the room. On the 14th day, she saw her. It was late afternoon, the light coming in low and gold through the main room window, when Mara looked up from her book and saw the figure standing in the corner. Not in her peripheral vision. Not at the uncertain edge of sight where the brain manufactures shapes from shadow and suggestion. Directly. She looked up, and the figure was there. Tall. Facing the wall, as in the photograph. The proportions still wrong in that way she still couldn't name. Something about the relationship between the head and the shoulders, about the length of the arms, about the way the figure occupied its own outline, as if it were slightly less solid than the space around it. It did not move. Mara did not move either. They remained like that for what she would later estimate was 4 minutes, though it felt like the kind of time that doesn't correspond to clocks. Thick, pressurized time, the kind that exists inside nightmares. Then Mara said quietly, "What do you want?" The figure turned. Not quickly, not with any dramatic speed. Slowly, incrementally, the way the creaks in the hallway moved, deliberate, patient, as if time worked differently for it. It turned until it was facing her, and its face was wrong, not monstrous. Not the face of anything in any film she had seen or any story she had read. Not teeth or darkness or distortion, just wrong. The features arranged in approximately the right locations, but the relationships between them slightly off. The eyes level with each other, but fractionally too far apart. The mouth too small for the jaw. The expression not blank, but carrying something she couldn't read. Not anger, not hunger, not malevolence. Something older and further away than any of those. something that had no word she knew because it had never needed one. She looked at it. It looked at her. Then she picked up her book and kept reading. She was not sure why. She would think about this for years afterward. Why? Confronted with the thing she had been half dreading for 2 weeks, she had simply looked back at her book. Some part of her had made a decision without consulting the rest of her, some very old, very calm part, the part that lived below fear. She read 3 more pages. When she looked up again, the corner was empty. That evening, she cooked dinner. She ate at the table. She watched 2 episodes of a television program she had already seen and found comforting precisely because she had already seen it. She went to bed at 11. She slept. In the morning, she found a name had been added to the wardrobe. Below hers. A new name, in handwriting she did not recognize, scratched into the wood in the same way as all the others. The name was also hers. Her full name this time. Her full name and her date of birth and, at the end, a date she hadn't reached yet. She stood there for a long time. Then she went and made coffee and sat by the window and watched the bare tree and thought about the date, which was 8 months away. And she thought, that is enough time. Enough time to understand what she was dealing with. Enough time to find the records Mr. V had spoken of. Enough time to look properly at whatever this was. To apply the same calm attention she had applied last night when she had looked directly at the face and not looked away last night when she had looked directly at the face and not looked away. She was not the sort of person who fled. She turned to her notebook and wrote, at the top of a fresh page, what happened in the original structure. She began to work. 8 months. Mara found the records in the city archives. Not easily, not in any of the obvious places, but eventually. The building on Rue Delacroix had been, before its current form, part of a much larger 18th century structure, a private hospital for the treatment of what the records called maladies de l'âme, diseases of the soul. It had housed for 17 years a physician named Armand Decroix, who had kept extraordinary records of his patients, not just their symptoms and treatments, but their dreams, their visions, the things they claimed to see. A recurring figure appeared in over 60 patient testimonies spanning a decade. Tall, wrong proportions, always in a corner, facing the wall. Decroix had noted, with the careful restraint of a man of science who was also, perhaps, beginning to doubt himself, the patients do not describe the figure as hostile. Several described feeling, in its presence, that they were being remembered, not watched, remembered. As if by something that knew them from a time they could not themselves access, being remembered. Mara sat with that for a long time in the reading room of the archive, the pages spread in front of her, the pale winter light coming through high, narrow windows. The building had burned in 1791. Most of it. The section that survived, a single corridor of rooms on the eastern wing, had been eventually absorbed into a newer structure, which had become in time the building on Rue Delacroix. The room that had been Decroix's primary consultation room, where most of the sightings had occurred, occupied the same footprint as the apartment on the 3rd floor. The same corner, the same wall. Mara photographed the records and walked back to the apartment. She stood in the main room in the afternoon light and looked at the corner.
I found the records, she said. Decroix's records. I know what you were, or what he thought you were.
Something that remembers. She paused.
I don't know what you want with the people who live here.
I don't know if you know what you want with them. But I've been here 8 months now and you haven't harmed me, and I'm choosing to believe that means something. The apartment was quiet.
The date in the wardrobe, she said. My date. I'd like to know what it means.
Nothing answered. Nothing moved. But then, and she would spend years deciding whether this had been real or whether she had needed it to be real and so made it so. The light in the room changed. Just for a moment, just a slight shift in the quality of the afternoon sun through the window, a brief warmth that felt less like meteorology and more like acknowledgement, like being remembered. Mara nodded. She went to the wardrobe and looked at the date again. 8 months from when she'd first seen it, which meant it was today's date. She stood with that for a long moment. Then she picked up a pen from the kitchen counter, went back to the wardrobe, and beneath the date she wrote one word, stayed. She closed the wardrobe door. In the courtyard below, the bare tree put out a single leaf. small and pale and new, the first sign of something it had apparently been working toward for a very long time. And the apartment on the third floor